We are back with 10 more films that got seized, shredded, smuggled, and prosecuted across multiple continents. Some you've heard of, some you haven't. All of them left a mark. Number 1. Snuff, 1976.
You will feel the pain, and you will not flinch from it.
Here's the wildest part about Snuff. The entire scandal was completely invented. Producer Alan Shackleton hired protesters to picket his own theaters. He personally wrote the leaflets claiming the film contained real murders. He fed the story to tabloids himself. He orchestrated the outrage from scratch, then watched it spiral completely beyond his control. NYPD stormed screenings. Argentina panicked. Feminist groups organized nationally. Women against violence against women mobilized across the country. And the beautiful, cynical, deeply troubling thing, it worked perfectly. The film itself is genuinely unremarkable. A low-budget Argentine thriller Shackleton bought cheap and slapped a new ending onto. That ending shows a woman apparently having her uterus torn out on camera, staged with enough conviction that audiences genuinely couldn't decide if it was real. But Shackleton understood something most filmmakers didn't. The controversy was the content. He wasn't selling a movie. He was selling a question. Is it real? Nobody knew. Nobody could prove otherwise. Bootleg tapes became generational contraband. The genuine snuff film myth still circulates on horror forums today, decades later. That's the exploitation masterstroke hiding in plain sight. Shackleton manufactured moral panic as a distribution strategy and accidentally created one of the most talked about films of the entire decade. Pure, calculated, genius. And if manufactured outrage could do that, wait until you hear what a vomit bag did for the next one. Number 2. Mark of the Devil, 1970. The marketing alone deserves a masterclass. Every ticket came with a vomit bag, not as a joke, as a genuine warning. Theaters handed them out at the door like programs, and the press covered it like a public health event. Because there's a scene where a woman accused of witchcraft has her tongue ripped out with metal pliers while she's strapped to a rack. Slowly, the camera doesn't look away. Audiences reportedly grabbed their complimentary vomit bags and actually used them. Suddenly, seeing Mark of the Devil wasn't just watching a film, it was surviving one. That's exploitation working at its absolute purest. The film follows 18th century witch trials with a brutality that felt less like period drama and more like a torture instruction manual. The most infamous scene involves rats, trained on meat, doing exactly what you're hoping they weren't trained to do. Actresses reportedly needed genuine therapy afterward. The production was uglier than the film. Director Michael Armstrong called it a church torture expose, a serious indictment of religious persecution. Censors called it pure depravity and moved on. Brazil, South Africa, and Ireland banned it. Finland seized every print. The UK cut 7 minutes of tongue-ripping just to get it past the board. But none of that is the real story. The real story is that those vomit bags are now selling for $200 plus as collector relics. Armstrong wanted to expose historical horror. What he actually built was the greatest merchandise campaign in exploitation cinema history. But if vomit bags were the marketing weapon of 1970, the next film didn't need any marketing at all. The government did it all for them. Number 3. Dawn of the Dead, 1978.
Granddad was a priest in Trinidad. He used to tell us, when there's no more room in hell, the dead.
George Romero didn't make a horror film. He made a cultural grenade. Shoppers turned undead, ripping entrails in blood fountains. Helicopter blades decapitating hordes. And here's what nobody talks about enough. Romero shot the whole thing in a real, functioning mall. Monroeville Mall in Pittsburgh. Truckloads of fake blood literally clogged the drains. The location wasn't a backdrop, it was a statement. Consumer culture, mindless and hungry, eating itself alive. The BBFC looked at it and called it beyond human endurance, then rejected it for over 20 years. Sweden, Norway, and Ireland refused outright. Police seized prints. Protests shut theaters. But censors made one catastrophic miscalculation. Banning it made it sacred. Audiences hunted bootlegs and paid fortunes for grainy copies. the mythology grew bigger than the film itself. Today, every zombie movie owes Romero a debt it can never repay. Artistic genius or mindless slaughter? Fans still can't agree. But that tension, commerce versus carnage, satire versus spectacle, is exactly why it endures. And speaking of films that governments desperately wanted erased, Wes Craven's debut made Dawn of the Dead look like a bedtime story. Number 4. Last House on the Left, 1972. Wes Craven's first film didn't feel like a movie. It felt like something the police should have been called about. 2 teenage girls, a gang of escaped convicts, and a camera that refused to look away from any of it. There's a scene where one of the girls is forced to humiliate herself in the woods while her attackers laugh. No music, no cutaway, just the camera sitting there, watching. Uncomfortable doesn't even cover it. Actress Sandra Cassell later reportedly spoke of psychological scars from filming that went beyond the performance. Not method acting, not publicity, but real damage from being pushed somewhere most directors never take their cast. Craven called it a Vietnam War allegory. American brutality abroad reflected back through suburban horror. Censors saw pure depravity and nothing else. The BBFC rejected it 5 times, calling it hellish subhuman. Banned for 31 years in the UK, the longest BBFC battle in slasher history. Ireland and Norway followed. Distributors across Europe faced criminal prosecutions. Meanwhile, grainy VHS bootlegs quietly built a generation of horror fans in college dorm rooms. The debate never settled. Feminist revenge blueprint or women-hating exploitation trash? Both sides still fight. What's undeniable is that the courtroom battles turned Craven's ugly debut into permanent mythology. But if Last House made censors reach for the phone, the next film made them reach for handcuffs. Number 5. Caligula, 1979. No film before or since has crossed this many boundaries simultaneously. Malcolm McDowell, Roman orgies, beheadings, and unsimulated sex spliced into gore footage inserted by producers without the director's knowledge or consent. Director Tinto Brass publicly disowned the final cut, but the film went out anyway. There's a scene where McDowell personally decapitates a row of prisoners with a giant rotating blade machine while laughing. It's so absurdly over the top that you don't know whether to be horrified or confused. And that's exactly the point. Caligula never lets you get comfortable enough to pick a reaction. Then it emerged that Penthouse founder Bob Guccione had funded the whole production. Tabloids didn't walk that story. They sprinted. Hollywood porn ring screamed headlines across 2 continents.
Is that right? Bob Guccione of Penthouse.
Yeah, he was behind the movie in every way.
And were you aware that the movie were you aware that the movie was going to be that sexually explicit? I've heard it rumored that because Peter O'Toole's involved, John Gielgud's involved. Sir John Gielgud, sorry.
A Knight of the Realm in a porno movie.
It's a porno movie.
That's what I said to him. How come, Sir John, that a Knight of the Realm is in a porno movie, you know?
Here's where the exploitation gets genuinely fascinating. Producers didn't just make a controversial film. They built a smuggling operation. Hardcore reels couriered past customs like state secrets. UK customs seized over 100 prints. Switzerland and Italy faced prosecutions. And yet bootlegs weren't just circulating. They were traded as luxury contraband. Status symbols for people who needed everyone to know they'd seen the unspeakable. Star power plus obscenity plus a Penthouse-funded scandal equaled something no marketing budget could buy. Today, the argument still rages. Roman epic masterpiece or degenerate filth? The answer entirely depends on which version you're watching. The seizures, the disowned cuts, the smuggled reels, somewhere along the way, the scandal stopped being about the film and became the film itself. And if Caligula blurred the line between cinema and pornography, the next film blurred the line between cinema and a crime scene.
As the monkey was brought down the hall and a toast to prosperity was made, the waiter presented the men with their tools of destruction.
Good. Look at that little monkey. Why don't you touch him? I know it'll be great.
Number 6. Faces of Death, 1978. Imagine being a teenager in the late 70s and your friend slides you a VHS tape and whispers, "Some of this is real." That's it. That's the whole marketing strategy. No trailer, no poster campaign, just word of mouth and pure human morbidity. A Mondo shock compilation. Plane crashes, executions, a monkey having its skull cracked open at a dinner table while diners casually eat its brains. That one scene alone broke people. But here's where it gets clever. The film was roughly 70 to 80% staged, professionally faked. The Vietnam autopsy sequence, the electric chair execution, the cult sacrifice footage, all fabricated with movie effects. But the producers never confirmed or denied anything. And that ambiguity was the product. Teens didn't just watch it, they studied it, frame by frame, desperately trying to catch the edit. New Zealand, Australia, and the UK banned it. Cops investigated producers. Tabloids called it a death cult film. None of it mattered. The bans just confirmed what every kid already suspected, that they were holding something genuinely dangerous and forbidden. The uncertainty was the horror. But if Faces of Death weaponized ambiguity, the next film weaponized actual history and got it catastrophically wrong. Number 7. SS Experiment Camp, 1976. There's a scene where Nazi doctors transplant a prisoner's testicles onto a female inmate. That's not subtext, that's the literal plot point. And somehow, that's not even the most disturbing part. The most disturbing part is how deliberately the film was engineered to exploit real historical trauma for maximum shock value. Director Sergio Garrone and his Italian producers reportedly used actual World War II medical records as source material, not for accuracy, but for authenticity of horror. They wanted audiences feeling like this could have happened. That uncomfortable proximity to real atrocity is exactly what made it so effective and so indefensible simultaneously. The film packaged all of it with explicit sexuality, torture scenes deliberately blurred with titillation in a way that made censors, critics, and even hardcore horror fans deeply uneasy. The BBFC called it repulsive. France refused classification. Prints were shredded across Europe. But the exploitation genius was cold and calculated. Use history's worst chapter as a backdrop, add enough sexual content to guarantee controversy, then sit back while the band does your advertising. History's ugliest chapter. Somebody else's profit margin. Number 8. Blood-Sucking Freaks, 1976. There's a moment where a man uses a woman's skull as a bowling ball, fully committed, played for laughs, right there on screen. And that tonal choice, horror as punchline, is exactly what made Blood-Sucking Freaks so uniquely difficult to dismiss. It wasn't trying to disturb you the way Salo disturbed you. It wanted you to laugh at yourself for watching it. Director Joel M. Reed framed the whole thing as Marquis de Sade satire, a torture theater where dismemberments are performed live for a cackling, tuxedoed elite. The audience inside the film laughs, which means you're sitting there laughing alongside them. That's the trap. Reed understood that implicating the viewer was far more transgressive than just grossing them out. And then he made it worse. Real meat hooks suspended actors during production. Hospital visits followed. The suffering wasn't entirely fictional. New York banned it pre-VHS. Reed sued the city. UK prosecutors went after tape owners. But the real exploitation wasn't the violence. It was Reed convincing an audience to find decapitation genuinely funny, and then leaving them to sit with that feeling long after the credits rolled. The next director didn't need special effects. He just pointed a camera at New York and let it speak. Number 9. The Driller Killer, 1979. Abel Ferrara shot this film in real East Village squats with real NYC punk bands on the soundtrack and a genuine atmosphere of urban desperation and decay. That's not atmosphere. That's the actual New York of 1979. Broke, violent, falling apart at the seams. Ferrara just pointed a camera at it and added a power drill. The exploitation genius here is how completely the film weaponized its own cheapness. There's a scene where Ferrara drills directly through a homeless man's skull in a subway tunnel, and the sound design is so uncomfortably realistic that audiences described feeling it in their own teeth. Not the visuals that broke people. The sound did. The grime wasn't a limitation. It was the product. Audiences weren't watching a horror film. They were watching a city disintegrate in real time, with a man drilling through skulls as the logical conclusion. And then there's the detail that almost nobody talked about publicly. The skull used on camera was reportedly rented from a medical supply company, a real human skull, sitting in a horror film. The BBFC called it mindless skull drilling and banned it. UK police raids followed, which was genuinely hilarious given its scrappy American indie origins. The ban lasted nearly 20 years. The Driller Killer has since been reassessed as urban prophecy. Others still call it unwatchable. Both descriptions are somehow accurate simultaneously. Our final film didn't need a drill or a vomit bag. It used a cartoon rabbit and nearly started a war. Number 10. Coonskin, 1975. Ralph Bakshi took Bugs Bunny's DNA and dropped it into the grimiest corners of 1970s Harlem.
Now you know good, Miss America, how you like this shit, huh?
Pimp rabbits, blackface mafia, animated hustlers shanking rivals in back alleys, while the film simultaneously skewers every racist caricature it depicts. The intention was savage satire. The reaction was immediate, explosive chaos. The NAACP threatened bomb attacks on theaters. Cops guarded screenings. Several of Bakshi's own animators quit mid-production, calling it racist poison. Paramount dropped it entirely. The film's power came from something almost accidental. Bakshi built his characters from real NYC hustlers and street figures, capturing something raw and alive that sanitized animation never could. But that authenticity made it impossible to defend simply. Was it celebrating the imagery or dismantling it? The film doesn't hold your hand. It just keeps escalating, blurring the line between critique and participation until you genuinely can't tell which side Bakshi is standing on. That ambiguity is either the whole point or the whole problem, depending on who you ask. Bootleg copies became underground contraband. The bomb panic guaranteed its immortality. Bakshi never apologized, never clarified. Decades later, cult fights still break out over whether Coonskin is bold American satire or just a slur wearing a trench coat. If you made it to the end of this one, you already know. The 70s were built different. No CGI, no safety nets, just raw filmmaking that never apologized. And before you go, somewhere around film 5, we almost included one that would have made this entire list look tame, but we're saving it for part 3. So if you're not subscribed yet, now's the time.